Are you looking for the perfect books to curl up with on a cozy autumn day? Well friends, I've got your back. In this video, I'm sharing my top cozy book recommendations, stories that feel like a warm hug full of charm, comfort and just a little sprinkling of magic. So grab your favourite blanket and a nice warm cup of tea and let's get started. First off, I'm starting out with the book that actually inspired this whole video. I just finished reading it this week and it is just published this week in the UK and in the US, and that is of course Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. This is a whimsical modern fantasy witchy novel. We follow a young woman named Belladonna Blackthorn, or Belle for short, and she is a secret witch who unexpectedly finds herself thrust back into the world of witchcraft on the eve of her 30th birthday. She works in a bookshop by day, so cozy, and finds that she doesn't necessarily use her magic quite as much as she used to. In the most literal and figurative senses, she's pretty much lost her magic and she's trying to find her way back to it. Life's gotten in the way and she just feels a bit flat. However, a mysterious letter does arrive and it beckons her back to her magical roots on the day of her 30th birthday, and she's thrust back into this chaotic world of witches, wands and supernatural beings. This is such a sweet, nostalgic feeling, cozy, comforting read that is absolutely perfect for this time of year. Through a mix of quirky magic, laugh out loud situations and heartfelt moments, Belle must decide if she can embrace her witchy heritage while also forging her own path in the world. Rewitched really blends things like magic and friendship and self-discovery in a really light-hearted yet heartwarming tale. Friends, this one is so nice and I'm so happy to have been able to read it. It is the perfect read for this time of year. It's a little bit twee, there's a little cat familiar, there's loads of lovely characters, and I believe she is writing her second book. I'm not sure if it's in the same world, but I do feel like there is a little bit of an opening at the end of this novel to bring us into a second one, so I would like to see another one in the not too distant future, but we'll see. I'm not sure if they're set in the same worlds or not. Next up then is another magical cozy book that I actually finished listening to this week, and that is The Spellshop by Sarah Beth Durst. I feel like I've been seeing this book all over Bookstagram and Booktube lately. If you're like me and the world of romantasy scares you away, this book is marketed as romantasy, but I feel like it's much heavier on the cute fantasy and lighter on the romance. We follow our protagonist Kyla, and she has never particularly been great with people. Can relate. Thankfully, as a librarian in the Great Library of Elysium, she has never really had to deal with too many people, so she works with her familiar Kaz. And I had heard of Kaz before I read this book and I was like, I don't know about this, but actually don't doubt it. Kaz is a spider plant and he is brilliant. He is such a fantastic addition into this novel. Essentially, he is magically sentient, and I didn't feel like that enticed me to read the book, but he's great. He's probably, if not, one of the best characters in the whole novel. And friends, there are some lovely characters in this novel. So we start out the book and there is a revolution, and Kyla and Kaz, now I feel like I'm saying her name wrong, Kyla? One of those. So our protagonist and Kaz have to flee the city and they try to save as many magical spell books as they can. They end up fleeing back to our protagonist's childhood home. They take refuge there and they're really thrust into life on the island. Magic has essentially become entirely controlled, if not banned, in this world, but our protagonist finds herself taking risks to help the island folk overcome some serious obstacles that they have been dealing with since they've basically been abandoned by the kingdom. This is such a sweet story. You'll have to suspend so much disbelief, but we've got mermaids, we've got flying cats, we've got everything. This book is absolutely brilliant and perfect for this time of year. It's very much one of those sickly sweet reads, so if that's not for you, maybe don't pick this one up. Next up then we have a book that I have recommended time and time again on this channel. I read this book last year and it made it into my absolute favourite books of 2023. So this is a novel about found family, which if you've been around here a while you know is one of my absolute ultimate all-time favourite book tropes. Similarly to Rewitched, we follow another young witch who has had to hide her magic, but in this book she has to keep away from other witches because if there are too many witches in the same place there's too much magic and things get a bit dodgy and dicey and they don't want to be found out, so they have to stay apart from each other. So our protagonist Micah Moon lost her parents at a young age and was raised essentially by strangers, so she's used to being alone. But as we all know, used to being alone doesn't necessarily equate to not lonely. She's very good at following the rules set by her coven, but she does have an online account, think YouTube, where she pretends to be a witch, thinking nobody will actually take it seriously. That is until she receives an incredibly unexpected message from some people begging her to travel to the remote and mysterious Nowhere House to teach 3 young witches how to control their magic. She goes even though this does break all the rules, and she quickly becomes entangled in not only the lives of her 3 charges but also the other people that are working in this house. There is a romance in this book, and as somebody who's not necessarily a romance reader, I just found it lovely. I found it really nice. I found it to be more than tolerable. It's really sweet, it's silly, it's wholesome. There is a lot of swearing in there though. There was just something about this book last year that was very much right book, right time for me. It's so cute, it's so wholesome, it's so lovely, and it is the definition of cozy. Next up then we have another book that absolutely makes it into my top books of all time. It's one of the very few books that I have ever given 5 stars to, and that book is of course Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. Friends, I loved this book. I didn't know that what I needed in my life was cozy fantasy, and I feel like Legends and Lattes was my first successful foray into this genre. I heard about this book and I thought maybe it sounded a bit silly, but I'm glad I persevered and picked it up. So I heard of it as being a cross between Dungeons and Dragons and Animal Crossing, and if you know anything about me in 2020, Animal Crossing, that was almost dangerous. I could not stop. I could not be tamed. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm working on it. We follow Viv, and she is a bounty hunter and she wants to get out of the game. She's getting a bit older, her back hurts, she's tired. She doesn't like the drama and the difficulty of her life anymore, and really what she dreams of is opening a coffee shop. But coffee in this world is something that hasn't really been heard of. It hasn't taken over in the way that it has in our world. She discovers it in a small town when she's on her travels as a bounty hunter, and all she wants to do after discovering coffee is open this coffee shop. And eventually she leaves her bounty hunter ways behind and she does open this coffee shop in a city called Thune. She comes across some old frenemies, makes some wonderful new friends. There might be a small spattering of romance in here too. It is so lovely. It is so particularly twee and cozy. What's more cozy than somebody opening their own coffee shop? It's set in what feels like such a high fantasy world, but it's absolutely accessible. It's really readable. It is such a great book. Cannot speak highly enough of it. Legends and Lattes. And then following up from that, I'm actually going to speak about the next book in this world, which is actually a prequel to Legends and Lattes, and that is Bookshops and Bonedust by Travis Baldree as well. So this is a prequel to Legends and Lattes, and we do follow Viv in her earlier days as she's actually taking up the life of a bounty hunter. But as we all do when we're young and silly, she gets a bit cocky and she injures herself during the hunt for a really powerful necromancer, and she finds herself left behind in a small seaside town to heal. She spends a lot of time helping out a new friend in their bookshop, where they find themselves caught up in quite an eventful story. And of course, in Legends and Lattes fashion, they pick up some wonderful characters along the way. It feels like there are stakes, but they're never particularly all that high. There is tension, but it's not going to get your heart racing by any means. Personally, I didn't enjoy this one quite as much as Legends and Lattes, but definitely still think it's worth the read if you're in the mood for something cozy and low stakes. I will say that I don't actually personally think it matters which book you pick up first. So if you wanted to start with this, I think it would be okay. Either way, I loved both of these books with my whole heart, and I hope that this might inspire some of you to pick them up. Next up then is a book that I sort of picked up on a whim before I had heard much about it, and that book is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. So we follow our protagonist Dora, and Dora is cursed by a fairy who takes half her soul, and since then she is left with no sense of things like fear or embarrassment, and she is very much prone to accidental scandal. So this feels like a low stakes kind of fantasy novel set in a very Bridgerton-esque world. I'm not personally the biggest Bridgerton fan. Now, I haven't read the books, so I can't speak on those. I'm not really into Regency novels all that much, so if that's something that you're not into, I will say that this is the kind of book that you probably could read. It might be up your street as well. So Dora lives with her cousin, and her cousin is basically her closest friend. Her cousin is everything that Dora isn't. She's prim, she's proper, she knows the lay of the land in terms of etiquette. She is going to London to find herself a husband, so Dora goes along with her. Dora hopes to essentially in this task to be a quiet, sensible wallflower, but of course in typical Dora fashion, things don't quite go that way. She meets Lord Sorcerer, who really tries to help her and tries to assist her in her situation with the fairy to maybe get back the other half of her soul. Dora is a character who is very autism coded. I'm not making that up. The author has said that she wrote Dora in that way on purpose, which I found really brilliant to read about, because we don't get much representation in that regard, especially in these kinds of books. This book is really fun. There's also an issue in this book that runs quite deeper than you might expect, and it was really great to read about. This book also feels quite historical, so if you're not into historical novels, this might not be for you, but personally I found it to be really fun, and there are other books within this series as well that I haven't yet picked up. Yes friends, I very much enjoyed this one, and nobody was more surprised than me. Next up then is a book that probably needs no introduction, and that is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. So we follow Miriam, and she is the daughter and granddaughter of moneylenders, but her father is really bad at his job, and his inability to collect his debts has left his own family on the edges of poverty, if not right in the depths of it. Miriam herself decides enough is enough, and she decides to take matters into her own hands. Hardening her heart, the young woman sets out to claim what is owed, and she gets a reputation for being able to turn silver into gold. When an ill-advised boast draws the attention of the young king of the Starrick, these grim kind of fey creatures who seem more ice than flesh, Miriam's fate and that of the two kingdoms will be forever altered. Miriam is set an impossible task by this king of the Starrick, and she unwittingly spins a web that draws in a peasant girl named Wanda, and Wanda is the unhappy daughter of a local lord, and he plans to wed his daughter to the dashing young Tsar. But Tsar Mernatius is not as he seems, and the secret he hides threatens to consume the lands of humans and Starrick alike. So torn between a few different deadly choices, Miriam and the unlikely allies that she picks up along the way, they embark on a desperate quest that will take them to their limits. This really channels myth and fairy tale, and it weaves this multi-layered magical tapestry, and friends, I loved this book so much. Again, really unexpected, didn't know what I was getting myself into. It's very wintry, it's very cozy, it's just lovely, and very much deserves its place on this list. Next up then we have a young adult fantasy, and that is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. So in this novel we follow Signa, and Signa is a 19-year-old girl who was orphaned as a baby. She has had a string of guardians. She's been passed around and around, and each of them have been more interested in the wealth that she's due to inherit rather than actually caring about her and her safety. Strangely enough, each of these guardians has met an untimely death, and this is why she keeps getting passed around. Her last remaining family members are the Hawthorns, and they're a wealthy family living in a great manor called Thorn Grove. So she is welcomed into to their manor after her previous guardian has passed away, and this is where the story really gets started. The lady of the house has passed away the year prior, and the family are living within the depths of grief. They don't really know where they stand, everything's a little bit up in the air, and the man of the house keeps throwing these eccentric parties just in an effort to relieve his own grief and loneliness, while his son is grappling to be able to take over the family business. And unfortunately then their daughter is succumbing to this mysterious illness that nobody seems to be able to cure, and is actually what her mother passed away from. So what I haven't mentioned thus far about Signa is that she can see spirits where other people can't see them. I see dead people. She's haunted by the ghost of Mrs. Hawthorne, who soon lets Signa know that her death was not due to natural causes, and she wants Signa to help her to save her daughter. Now, I won't say too much more, but this novel is set again within high society, and our heroine grapples with being a proper lady, same girl, and really just wants to forge her own path. There is a romance in this book, and it is quite a significant part of this story, and I wasn't necessarily 100% on board with it, but I feel personally like it didn't take away from the story at all. It's a little bit unusual, but we don't kink shame here. This novel is definitely just a bit of fun, and the mystery here was really what kept me interested. I won't say it was my favourite book on this list, but I did really enjoy it, and I do plan to read the sequels once I have finished up with my physical TBR. Next up, we have a book that I feel isn't spoken about enough online, and that is The Doll Factory by Elizabeth McNeil. So I believe that this book is a debut. This is a really great story that mixes art, obsession and possession. It's very much a historical kind of fantastical novel. I won't necessarily say that it's fantasy, but it feels quite fantastical. It's set in London in 1850, and we follow Iris, who is an aspiring artist, and she meets somebody named Silas, and Silas is a collector, and he is entranced with the strange and the beautiful, and he becomes obsessed with Iris. So Iris is asked to model for a pre-Raphaelite artist. I can't believe I said that right first time. His name is Louis Frost, and she agrees to do this on the condition that he will teach her to paint. And suddenly her world begins to expand to become a place of art and love. But Silas is lurking in the background, and things go a bit awry. This novel is much darker than I expected it to be, and I will say it is a cozy novel, but it's maybe not cozy in the way that some of these other novels are. It's that bit darker. It's not scary or anything like that, but for me, I felt really cozy while reading this book, and I couldn't not put this book on this list. I feel like more people need to read this book. It is a Sunday Times bestseller, but I never hear anybody speaking about it, and I really loved this book. So pick it up if you get the opportunity, and if it sounds like it's something that might be up your street. And then last but absolutely not least, we're finishing up this list with yet another found family story, and that book of course is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. You've heard about this one. There has been major hype about TJ Klune's books. So we follow Linus Baker, who leads a very quiet and solitary life, and our pal Linus works as a caseworker at the department in charge of magical youth, and he essentially sees his days overseeing the well-being of children in government sanctioned orphanages. Linus is one day unexpectedly summoned by extremely upper management, and he's given a curious and highly classified job where he travels to an orphanage on an island where 6 dangerous children reside. Dangerous. So these children all are slightly unusual, definitely err on the side of magical and fantastical, but the children are not the only secret that this island keeps. Their caretaker is the charming and enigmatic Arthur, and he will do anything to keep his wards safe. And as Arthur and Linus grow closer, these long held secrets are exposed, and Linus must make a choice whether to destroy a home or to watch the world burn. It's really sweet, really out there, and really quite silly in places, and ultimately it's just incredibly heartfelt. There is a reason that this book has so much hype, and if you are looking for cozy, you'll definitely find it within the pages of this book. And that's it from me, friends. So those are my tip top cozy recommendations. If you have any good cozy recommendations that I haven't mentioned here, please do mention them in the comments below. If you want to leave a comment but don't know what comment to leave, be a little bit creative and go find me your most cozy emoji and leave it in the comments below. Otherwise, if you want to see more from me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And that's that, pals. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll chat to you next week in another video. Bye bye.